Your peace is their problem. That is the opening fact of this reading, and I want to let it land before we go anywhere else. Not your behavior, not something you did or said or actively directed at this person. Your peace, the specific, settled, internal quality of someone who has arrived at a place of not being consumed by this and who is living inside that not consuming without performing it and without announcing it and without any deliberate strategy of communicating their unbotheredness to anyone, just being it. And the being of it is driving someone in your life to a specific quality of frustration that I can read clearly from here. The peace you have found is producing in them something they did not prepare for. I want to begin with the unbothered piece because the title names it, and the specific quality of what unbothered means in this context is worth examining before we go anywhere else. Unbothered is not indifferent. I want to make that distinction immediately because there is a version of unbothered that is simply the absence of care. That is the specific hollow quality of someone who has nothing invested and therefore nothing at stake and therefore nothing to be bothered by. That version is easy. It requires nothing. It produces nothing of significance in the person who encounters it because it communicates nothing of significance about the person embodying it. What you have is the other version, the version that comes after something, after caring, after being in the specific, sometimes overwhelming, sometimes consuming quality of being very much bothered and navigating everything that being bothered produced. After the work of processing what needed to be processed and releasing what needed to be released and arriving through genuine internal work at the specific earned quality of no longer being organized around this situation or this person in the way you were organized around them before. That version is different from indifference in every way that matters. Indifference is the absence of something. Your unbothered is the presence of something, of peace that was built, of a center of gravity that was recovered, of a version of yourself that has enough of its own substance and its own momentum that the specific situation no longer requires the allocation of your primary attention to sustain itself. That version costs something to achieve, and the person who is frustrated by it can feel the difference. Let me describe what the frustration actually is, because frustrated is the word the title uses, and it is not the whole picture of what I am reading. The frustrated is the surface expression of something that runs deeper. They expected a different response, not consciously necessarily, but in the specific assumption-based way that people who have been in a particular dynamic with another person develop a particular expectation of what their actions produce in that person, who have calibrated themselves over time to a specific quality of reaction from you, who have learned to read the landscape of how you respond, and who have built from that reading a model of how you work. The model predicted that you would be bothered, that the specific thing that happened or the specific way they have been operating or the specific choices they have made in relation to you would produce in you the kind of visible, affect-laden, clearly I am in your field quality of being bothered that would communicate to them that they still have access to your interior, that they can still produce an effect in you, that the connection between your well-being and their choices is intact in the specific reactive way it used to be intact. The model was wrong. You are unbothered, not performing it, actually in it. And the gap between what the model predicted and what is actually present is what is producing the frustration. That version costs something to achieve. And the person who is frustrated by it can feel the difference. I want to describe what feeling the difference actually means for the person encountering your earned unbothered, because it is not simply that they notice you are calm. It is that they notice something in the quality of the calm that is different from indifference. Indifference has a flatness to it, a specific, neutral, nothing here quality that actually communicates the absence of any significant prior investment, that says this never mattered enough to produce visible disturbance. That is available to any person in relation to any situation that never reached the level of genuine significance. Your unbothered has a different quality. It has depth, the specific, visible, this person has been through something and has arrived somewhere, quality of someone who has processed a significant experience and who is on the other side of the processing. The calm that comes after the storm is qualitatively different from the calm that exists because there was no storm. It carries a gravity that the flat calm does not. And the person who is frustrated by your unbothered is frustrated partly because they can feel that gravity, can feel that something happened and that something was worked through, and that the working through produced something that they are now encountering as the settled, grounded, genuinely at peace quality of someone who is no longer at the mercy of the situation. That recognition of the depth behind the calm is part of what is frustrating, because shallow calm can be disrupted. Deep calm cannot. I want to speak to the silence, because the silence is the second element the title names, and it carries its own weight separate from the unbothered. Silence is active. This is the piece that the frustrated person is discovering and that they did not anticipate discovering. Silence is not the absence of communication. It is a form of communication. A specific, clear, cannot be misread by anyone who is paying close attention form of communication that says something that words in many contexts would say less clearly. Your silence says, I do not require this interaction. Not I am not capable of it. Not I am hurt by it in a way that prevents it. I do not require it. The specific self-sufficient quality of someone who has enough going on in their own interior and their own life that the specific absent quality of communication from a particular direction is not producing a gap that needs to be filled. The silence is completeness, not incompleteness wearing the appearance of composure. And the person encountering it is frustrated because silence of this quality is one of the things that cannot be fought against or argued with or undermined, because it does not provide the specific response-shaped opening that any active communication would provide, because the silence offers nothing to push against. There's nothing to push against. And that, for this person, is the most maddening quality of what you are producing. I want to describe the specific texture of their frustration, because understanding what it actually looks like from inside them will help you understand what is happening and why the reading matters. They are testing the specific, somewhat transparent, ultimately ineffective quality of someone who is not willing to accept the unbothered and the silence as the final answer, and who is therefore trying different things to see if any of them produce the expected response. A different approach, a different tone, a different channel, a different framing of whatever the situation is. Each test is aimed at the same thing. Confirmation that you are still in their field in the specific, reactive, I can affect you way that would give them back the sense of connection and influence they have been used to having. Each test is producing the same result. You're unbothered, your silence, and each iteration of the test producing the same result is adding to the frustration in the specific accumulating. I have tried multiple approaches and none of them are working way that escalates frustration rather than resolving it. Each iteration of the test producing the same result is adding to the frustration in the specific accumulating. I have tried multiple approaches and none of them are working way that escalates frustration rather than resolving it. I want to describe what the testing looks like in practice because I think naming the specific forms it takes will help you recognize what you are already observing. The first form is the probe, the specific, seemingly casual message or comment or question that is designed to produce a response. That arrives in a form that looks like ordinary contact, but that carries within it the specific gauging quality of something that is checking for availability, checking whether the door is still closed, whether the silence has shifted, whether a particular framing of the outreach might produce what the previous framings have not. The second form is the escalation. When the probe produces nothing, the escalation follows. A message with more urgency, more directness, something designed to produce the specific I cannot ignore this quality of something that demands engagement, that is specifically calculated to be difficult to leave unanswered. That stakes something in a way that was absent from the probe. The third form is the indirect. When the direct approaches fail to produce the expected result, the indirect arrives, something through a mutual connection, something placed where you will encounter it without being directly addressed, something that maintains deniability about its purpose while still serving the same function as the direct approaches, all three testing the same thing. Whether you are still in their field, whether the unbothered and the silence are real, they are. Let me speak to something about what the unbothered and the silence are actually communicating to them. Because even though the communication is not intentional on your part, it is being received very clearly. It is communicating that you have moved, not in the geographic or practical sense, in the interior sense, that the you who is currently operating is not operating from the same position that the prior version of you was operating from when the dynamic between you was what it was, that something has shifted, that the specific interior arrangement of how you relate to this situation and to this person has changed in a fundamental way, that the behavior is faithfully reflecting. The behavior is reflecting an interior that is no longer organized around them, and they know it. That knowing is the source of the frustration, because when someone's interior is organized around you, you have access, you have influence. You have the specific ability to produce effects in them by directing certain things in their direction. And the interior that is no longer organized around you has removed that access, has removed that influence, has removed the ability to produce the expected effects. The frustration is the frustration of access denied, not through your deliberate withholding, through your genuine having moved on from the position that made the access possible. Tell me in the comments if this reading is landing precisely, if the quality of the frustration I am describing, the testing, the escalation, the specific quality of someone who is not getting the expected response and who is trying different things to get it, matches something you have been observing in a specific person. Whether the unbothered and the silence I am describing are things you are genuinely living in or things you are working toward. Either way, I want to know where you are. I want to speak to something that I think is the most important thing I can say to you in this reading. Do not break the silence out of discomfort with their discomfort. This is the specific instruction and the specific temptation that is present in your energy right now, because there is a version of Virgo care that produces a particular vulnerability to the discomfort of others. That finds the experience of someone being frustrated, even someone who has produced their own frustration through their own choices, uncomfortable in a way that creates pressure to resolve the discomfort, to say something, to do something, to provide the specific response-shaped opening that the silence is currently not providing. Do not do that. Not from coldness, not from the desire to punish, not from any of the deliberately constructed retributive motivations that would make the maintaining of the silence a strategy rather than an authentic expression of where you are, simply because the silence is true. And breaking true silence to manage someone else's discomfort with the truth is a form of dishonesty that costs you in ways that do not immediately announce themselves, but that are real. The silence is true. Maintain the truth. I want to speak to what the unbothered actually requires to be sustained, because it is not a state that maintains itself without anything. It requires something specific from you. Continued investment in your own life. The specific, active, there are things in my life that are genuinely interesting quality of someone who is not simply performing detachment from this situation, but who is genuinely occupied elsewhere, who has real things to engage with, real things to build, real relationships that are genuinely reciprocal in a way that produces the specific, genuine, this is nourishing quality of someone who is being refilled by their life rather than depleted. The unbothered is not an absence of engagement. It is engagement directed elsewhere. And the elsewhere has to be genuinely interesting enough that the directing is authentic rather than performed. If your elsewhere is genuinely interesting, the unbothered maintains itself without effort. If the elsewhere is not yet genuinely interesting, the work is to make it so, not for the purpose of demonstrating anything to anyone, for the purpose of having a life that is worth your full attention. If your elsewhere is genuinely interesting, the unbothered maintains itself without effort. If the elsewhere is not yet genuinely interesting, the work is to make it so, not for the purpose of demonstrating anything to anyone, for the purpose of having a life that is worth your full attention. I want to add something practical to this, because making the elsewhere genuinely interesting is a specific practice, and I want to give it some content. It is not about filling the time. Filling time produces a particular, slightly hollow quality of distraction that does not have the specific, nourishing quality of genuine engagement that keeps you occupied without actually engaging you. That prevents the thinking about the situation without producing anything that replaces what the situation was providing. Genuine engagement is different. Genuine engagement is the specific quality of bringing your actual intelligence and your actual care and your actual investment to something that deserves those things. That grows as you engage with it. That produces something beyond the engagement itself. That rewards continued attention with the specific satisfying quality of something that is developing. Find what produces that quality in your life right now, not from a list of should be interesting things, from the honest, direct question of what, when you are in it, makes time pass in a way that leaves you more rather than less. That is where your elsewhere lives. That is what maintains the unbothered without you having to maintain it. Let me speak to what comes next in this dynamic. Because the frustration is the current state, and the current state is not permanent. One of two things happens. The frustrated person, confronted with the specific, sustained, not yielding quality of your unbothered and your silence, eventually exhausts the specific resource that was sustaining the testing and the frustration and arrives at the only available alternative. They change their approach, not necessarily in the direction of what you would want from them, in the direction of what the sustained non-response to their testing has indicated is required. They bring something different, something that is not the same thing repackaged in different language, something that has a different quality, that approaches from a different place. That offers something more genuine than what the testing was offering. Whether that something is enough to warrant a different response from you is, when it arrives, your decision, or the frustration resolves into acceptance. The specific, quiet, finally I understand quality of someone who has tested long enough and found the same result consistently enough that the conclusion becomes unavoidable, that the door they were testing is no longer the door it was, that the you on the other side of the door is not the you who would respond in the way they were expecting, that you have actually moved. And the moving is real. In that acceptance, something settles. Not for you. For them, the frustration becomes resignation, and the resignation becomes eventually the specific quality of someone who has finally accepted the reality of the situation rather than continuing to push against it. Either outcome requires the same thing from you: the continued, genuine, authentic maintenance of where you actually are. I want to say one final thing before we close. The silence and the unbothered are not weapons. I want to name that explicitly because I want to protect you from the specific, slightly corrupting quality of allowing something that is genuinely true about where you are to become a strategy, of allowing the authentic expression of your current position to become the deliberate management of another person's experience of you for a particular purpose. The moment the silence becomes strategic, it stops being authentic. And authentic is the only version of it that has the quality I have been describing throughout this reading. The only version that is unassailable, the only version that cannot be argued with or fought against or eventually worn down. Strategic silence has cracks. Authentic silence does not stay in the authentic version. Not the version that is watching for effect. The version that is simply where you actually are. As we close, I want to give you one image. You in your actual life, not in the dynamic with this person. In your actual daily, genuinely occupied with real things life, doing what your life requires, being who you are in the contexts that receive you, moving through your days with the specific quality of someone who has enough real substance in their actual existence that the frustration of someone in their periphery is genuinely in the periphery, not at the center, not even near the center, simply there at the edge, producing its frustration, while you are here, unbothered, genuinely,